And um, so at this point of the semester, we've kind of talked about, or this point of the class rather, we've kind of talked about most of the sort of important things that are within MakeCode from a language standpoint and what we have at our disposal in terms of you guys creating a game. Okay, so then the next sort of thing and what we'll work on for most of the rest of the semester is just okay, the training wheels just came off, right? Let's start thinking about what you guys want to do for a more extended game project where you're going to basically start, well, essentially from scratch. Okay. Um, and so what kind of ideas do you have given what you've seen is sort of the what you have at your disposal within the language, but also sort of the limitations that make code sort of unfortunately has. Okay. One of the biggest limitations that we have is in the art department. Okay. That it is possible, but it's extremely laborious. And I'm going to play around with it and see if I can find a slightly easier way to do this. You can't just import any art that you want into MakeCode. Okay, unlike Scratch where you could do this. And one of the reasons that you can't is, I think we talked about this probably a week or two ago. Um, how is art actually stored in MakeCode? Well, how many colors do you have? Yeah, there's just it's 16. Okay, where one of those colors is sort of the absence of color, so sort of like a transparency. Um, and then you've also got black and white, and there's like pink and green, and but you have a pretty limited color palette. Okay, so the way that the graphics data is stored is basically in a paint by numbers kind of format. So for each pixel, there's a number assigned to it that's one or well 0 through 15. Okay, corresponding to which of those colors it is, and the colors are always in the same order in the palette thing. Um, and so then the graphics part knows, okay, color 3 is this greenish color, whatever it is. And so that's what goes there. Okay, so you can't just copy and paste in graphics that you make elsewhere. Asterisk. Okay. Um, you could, but you sort of have to convert them to respect the color palette that MakeCode has, and it's kind of a pain in the butt. Okay. So it's not that you're 100% limited to the art that's in MakeCode, but at the same time, like you guys saw what the graphics editor is, right? It's not Photoshop. Okay. Um, we were able to make some simple stuff without too much trouble, for like tic tac toe, for example. But it's not super high quality. Okay, so as you think about what you guys want to do, think about it in terms of like, okay, I have a bunch of art that MakeCode already has built in. How could I use that and maybe extend that rather than necessarily starting 100% from scratch? Okay, with the art. Now, unless you like really, really are like, art major, très magnifique, you're such an artist that you're going to cut your ear off to try and get a girlfriend or something. Huh? No? That's happened once, by the way. Not here, obviously, but you guys know this story, right? No, you don't know this? Oh, about cutting the ear off? Yeah. Yeah. Who is it? Yeah. I have not. Is it still running? Which if it's downtown. Oh, yeah, on like Mass Ave or whatever. Okay. Um, yeah, look, because that'd be interesting. Um, so yeah, anyway, like some of you guys have some art talent. I am not in that pile, right? Um, and so, obviously the training wheels are kind of off. Okay, so like I said, don't kill yourself with the art. Um, the other thing that is like I think overly limited in make code is audio, and that's not something we've really talked about yet. So let's actually look at that. So let me just open the tic-tac-toe project since we were so we have something. But in the music department, there are some built-in sounds, okay, and they're in a list here. So let me just put something in there, right? So you've got power ups, power downs, magic wand, siren, a pew pew, right? Footsteps, jumping sounds. Those are what's built in. It's not really a whole lot. Okay. Now, I guess maybe one thing I should mention is what's the difference between playing a sound and playing a sound until done? No. You would have to like continually to say play this sound. Okay. The until done means that it plays the sound before it moves on to the next piece of code. So for walking, you'd want to do something like looping and stopping, okay? Or stop all sounds will kill everything that's playing. So the sound department is, well, there's at least some stuff there. It's not a whole lot, but there's something, okay? Music is where this really, really sucks, okay? Because what you have to do is, so for example, let me say play melody. If you click on this, okay, you guys couldn't hear that, but um, it color codes the notes, kind of like. Does anybody have like a sibling that's maybe like under 5 years old or so? No. Okay. Well, but you did at some point. Okay. Do you guys remember those like little xylophone toys that you could get for kids where the things are it's like a rainbow of for the different notes, right? I think that's kind of what they were going for here is to sort of remind you of that. But you guys know all know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Like children's toys have evolved significantly in the last 30, 40, 50 years, but there's some things that are always going to be the same, right? And that's one of them. Or like I don't know, did anybody ever have Lincoln Logs when you were a kid? Or Tinker Toys? Or Erector sets? Or, I mean, Legos, I'm assuming that was, yeah, I still have all my Legos too. Huh? Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, a couple years ago, I was like, it was my birthday, and I was like, you know what? I want a train. I want a Lego train. I never had a Lego train as a kid. I had the monorail sets, but I never had the trains. So I drove to Indy, went to the Lego store, and you know how they get you when you walk into the Lego store. Hey, welcome to the Lego store. Who's getting a new Lego set today? Right, that's clever. Right, see what they're doing. I'm like me. So anyway, um, yeah, okay. So it's kind of like that, and there's a couple. So you really shouldn't think of the music that's in here as being music proper, as more so like a little jingle here and there. Okay. Um, and that's something that I think could really be extended in make code. Now, I wouldn't necessarily want it where you could just like upload an MP3 and play it, right? Because that's kind of too far in the other direction. But music in the sort of 8 and 16-bit era um, kind of worked like this, but I wish it had a little bit more that we could work with. Um, so I don't know. Maybe I'll go on sabbatical and um, uh, be able to do it, right? So your jingles are sort of limited. You can choose the tempo at which it plays it, in terms of beats per minute, so you can make it faster or slower. But maybe the way to think about this would be like, um, have you guys all played Zelda, one of the Zelda games? Yeah. Uh, so like, what happens in Zelda when you uncover a secret? There's that little jingle, right? And you guys all know what I'm talking about if you've played the game, right? That's the kind of thing that you can do with the music here, right? It's not going to be like full on songs. I mean, you maybe could do it, but it's not going to be full on music. Okay. So, anyway, okay. And that's basically all we've got. The only other things that you have are you can set the volume, right? So you can keep it from being too loud relative to the sound effects. Um, you can also put in rests um, or just play a single tone, right? So you could actually do a full on song by stringing together a bunch of these things, right? It would be kind of laborious to do it, but you could, okay? And then in terms of like, half beats and middle C and those sorts of things, uh, the way it does it is what you're really picking there, where it says 262, middle C, that's its frequency in hertz. Um, and if you look at so C sharp, for example, it's all you're picking the frequency in hertz of the tone. Now that said, do any musicians or like people are going to do music major or minor in here? No, maybe. What did you play? Sing. Okay. What about vocals? Glee Club. Are you in Glee Club? You were okay. So um, anyway, this is one thing that the fact that it's limiting, I think, is actually good because it reflects what the 8 and 16-bit eras, 8-bit era especially, were like. So all of these notes have an integer for their frequency in MakeCode. But does that mean that they have integer frequencies, period? Not necessarily. Okay. In fact, um, the increment between notes, uh, the difference in frequency actually changes based on how high or low on the scale you are. And um, what's kind of interesting, or at least in the Western canon, is that that interval is actually the cube root of 12. Um, and so let's take, for example, so I played violin when I was in school. Um, Concert A, 440 hertz. Okay. What's A sharp in terms of its frequency? Well, it would be uh, the cube root of 12 times 440. Okay. And if we just pop open a calculator real quick, um, or I'll just use Mathematica because, if you're going to do something, do it correctly. All right. So let's do 440 times the cube root of 12. Okay. And then let's get its numerical value. Uh, I'm sorry. I'm an idiot. It's the 12th root of 2. I haven't had coffee this morning. 466.164 hertz. Okay, but if we go into make code there for the A sharp, what is it going to have? 466 on the nose. Okay, now you got to have a pretty well trained ear to be able to hear the difference between, to hear a tenth of a hertz, right, being off there. But if you have a well-trained ear and you've been a musician, right, you can hear that difference. Okay, so it's slightly off from the true well temperament of a piano, but that's not that far off. Okay, so anyway, um, yeah, so like I said, you can do a song, but the way you'd have to do it is with a bunch of these things where you basically say, okay, I want this for half a beat and this for an eighth note and so on, right? Now, what would be a good idea if you were to do a crap load of these is dump them into a function, right? So that you can put it over there, kind of out of the way. The other thing that might be more handy there, rather than having to do a lot of this dragging and dropping, is actually to use the fact that we've got some Python, right? Because you can go down to, let's see, where is it? Here, right? This, that block that we just did to play a single note for a given duration, music.playtone, parentheses, frequency, comma, music.beat, beat fraction dot half, right? Okay, well, wouldn't it be easy to copy and paste this a whole bunch of times and then change the numbers and whatnot to the appropriate values? So, like if you had a piece of sheet music, you could sit there and translate it from the sheet music to this without too much trouble. Okay, it would be a little laborious, but would it be like complicated or mind boggling? No. If you know how to read sheet music, this would be relatively straightforward. Okay, it would just take a little bit of time. Okay, so you can use the Python stuff here. To maybe accelerate certain things. That, by the way, is kind of what I want to do for the last like week or so of the semester, is actually start to look at, okay, how do we transition from you guys programming in blocks to doing things in Python, particularly because how many of you guys are signed up for CS-111 in the fall? Okay. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. So that's obviously a Python course. Okay. And, one of the purposes of a course like this, it's an introduction to programming. And hopefully you guys have seen the block code stuff is a useful introduction, but it really is only that, an introduction, right? It's kind of like when you guys first learned to ride bicycles, you had training wheels on the sides, right? Those were useful as you were learning, the other mechanics. But eventually, what had to happen? You had to take them off because once you took them off, what could you do with your bicycle? You could do way more than you could with those training wheels on, right? Okay, and so I kind of look at the block based stuff to some extent like that. Okay, now I say some extent because there are block based languages that are equally robust to something like C++ or Python. Okay, and I'm going to show you one of them. Um, okay, you guys play, video games and stuff. Um, Did anybody play Cyberpunk or the Witcher series? You've seen them, you've probably heard of them. Okay. So the developer of that, CD Project Red, they're in Poland. Okay. Which means that, next week they could be in Russia. We'll find out, right? Um, Depending on what Putin decides to do next. No. You guys been following the news? Yeah. Okay. Um, which I'll give you a hint, by the way, particularly for seniors. How many of you guys are news junkies and like read or watch news like every day? Once a week, maybe. You're shrugging your shoulders like, whatever. Okay. Well, okay. So yeah, I don't watch TV news. I prefer to read news online or something, right? It's just whatever. Okay, but I'm checking the news probably multiple times a day because I'm kind of a news junkie. Okay, now do I care about what Kim Kardashian said about the slap at the Oscars? No. Like, I could care less about that. But what I do care about is, oh, I don't know, the war in Ukraine and, right, stuff that actually matters to global civilization. Um, when you guys are seniors, especially, over winter break before you take comps, for God's sake, keep on top of the news every day, okay? Because what do you think is one of the easiest places to go with the at-large component of the oral exam? Yeah, like such and such country bombed such and such other country yesterday. What do you think about that? Right? And if you don't even know that it has happened, well, it's not going to look good. Okay. That's especially true if you're like a political science major or something, because duh, of course you got to keep up with the news. Okay. Um, anyway, um, sorry, that was a little bit of a tangent there. The graphical programming is not just for beginners, okay? Because one of the things that I think you've noticed is very useful about graphical programming is it's fast in terms of just getting something thrown together. It also means that it's very difficult to make certain kinds of errors that are very easy to make with text-based coding. We call these, amongst other things, syntax errors. Okay, so for example, like in Python, and we'll talk about this more later. You see how the uh, line 8 there is tabbed in, is indented in relative to line 7. Okay, in Python that matters. The tabbing, how things are nested, or tells you how things are nested. So I look at that and I see, okay, the body of what happens if the if condition is true is whatever's below that and tabbed over by one level. Okay, so I know the sort of logical structure just by how the text is arranged. Okay. Um, if you didn't know that, or if you were a novice, you could very well make that error. Okay. The other thing, things that are really syntax errors. So you see how there's a colon at the end of line 7 there? In Python, that colon must be there for an if statement, right? So you have if condition colon, then stuff. Well, forgetting that colon is something that's very easy to do when you're in a hurry, you're worrying about something else, right? So if you forget the colon, it's not going to work. Forgetting the colon is called a syntax error. In graphical programming, it is almost impossible to make syntax errors, okay? Because if we looked at that if condition in the block, okay, so say for example this one, right? All you have to do is socket in what the condition is, right? And the socketing, it's next to impossible to screw that up because what shape, right? The thing that you're socketing in has to have pointy brackets because the socket into which it's going has pointy brackets. And I mean, you don't have to be like a super whiz bang programmer to realize that probably a thing with pointies on the side should go into a socket that has pointy things on the side, right? I mean, Colin's not even here, but if he were, I mean, that might be a stretch for Colin. Okay. But yeah. Okay. And actually, I guess the subject of we were talking about kids' toys, right? Even very, very, very young children figure this out, right? Because what's one of the other kind of toys that kids often have? Like it's got like three holes. There's a square hole, a round hole, and like a star-shaped or triangular hole or something like that. And then they've got those pieces, and they discover that look, you can't put the round thing in the square hole. Yeah. Um, so okay. Um, yeah. So, but if you're typing all of this stuff out and you're working in text-based coding, it's much easier to make those kinds of mistakes. Okay. So a real language, if you will, that you can do stuff graphically is so I mentioned video games, the CD Project Red. Um, what was sort of the big well, okay, so Cyberpunk. Has anybody played it or maybe heard about it? What was the problem with Cyberpunk? Yeah. Okay. Right. So on the console side, if you had like a PS4 or an Xbox One or whatever not the Series S or X, but the previous generation, um, it looked like absolute crap on that. Okay. And because like they really should have launched it as an exclusive for Series S and X, and also for the PS5. Okay, but they didn't. Whatever. Okay. The other reason that that happened though is because they were so ambitious with what they were developing that they kind of oversold their own product. Right? They overhyped it. It's going to be the most amazing game ever, and then when it launched, maybe not so much on the consoles, but definitely on the PC, it was buggy as all get out like like and not just little bugs here and there that always happens but like broken almost. Okay. And it was so broken even to some extent on the console department that Sony, right, so if you buy it digitally through their store, right, it's Sony's store, or you can go out to GameStop and get the disc or whatever, right, it was so broken that they actually stopped selling it and were issuing refunds to people that requested it for because of how janky it was compared to what it was advertised as. Um, and one of the reasons that all these bugs and everything happened is because the game engine that they were working on, which they had developed in house, um, and had used previous iterations for their previous game, which I think was The Witcher 3, was their immediate predecessor. They were basically pushing it like far beyond what it was really capable of. So maybe a week or two ago, they announced that, okay, you know what, we're done developing our own engines from scratch. And they signed a deal with, any guesses? Yes, exactly, with Epic, that their next gen stuff is just going to use Unreal Engine. Okay. And because what you do when you do that, I mean, you lose some things, right? But it, Epic develops the engine. Now you don't have to develop the engine from complete scratch. You can modify it because part of the deal with Epic is that the source code is freely available. You just have to pay Epic if you use it in a commercial product. Um, so that's how they make their money for it. Um, Yeah, but that was a pretty shrewd move, okay? And a lot of games that you guys play, right? So let's take Unreal Engine. What uses Unreal Engine that you guys have played recently? Well, what's probably the number one game? I mean, I joke about this every time, huh? Is Fortnite, right? I walk in and I'm like, where are we dropping, boys? Right? You guys all know what I'm talking about because you've either played Fortnite or PUBG. Huh? I don't know, maybe like Clash Royale. Is that like a battle royale version of Clash of Clans or okay. So, well, what is it you guys are playing nowadays? Huh? Clash Royale. Okay, what else? Okay, so your mobile games. All right, so what are you playing that say not mobile? Huh? Okay. Fortnite. Um, what else? Elden Ring. Yeah, that's a big new one. I don't know what engine Elden Ring uses. Google it real quick for me because I'm curious. Yeah, Call of Duty, those sorts of things. So a lot of games are starting to use, well, not starting, but particularly indie games or not like AAA blockbuster titles, but things that are sort of in between. A lot of those people are using either Unreal Engine from Epic or Unity, right? Because they're basically free engines and both of them work on a similar licensing model. How is it that those companies make their money? If you use their engine for a commercial product, then you have to pay them a percent of your profits, right? So it's kind of a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of thing. They have a vested interest in your product being successful, right? Because the more successful your product is, the more money they get from you, right? But they also don't want that money cut to be too big because then people wouldn't use their engine, right? Yeah, okay. So anyway, um, Unreal Engine has a visual scripting programming system called Blueprint, and it is extremely robust. Um, and one of the reasons that they put so much energy in developing it is so we have to kind of go back historically. The first Unreal Engine and Unreal game launched in 1995. It was amazing. I can tell you guys, I remember it. Or maybe it was 96, but whatever. It was back in the mid 90s. Okay. Um, and it just blew the other game engines that were on the market out of the water in just terms of how good it looked and how quick it was to design stuff with it. Well, there was a scripting system that was meant for doing things like the player steps on a button and then an alarm goes off or then the door opens and an enemy comes out or something, right? Some sort of quick kind of thing like that. Well, something simple like that, a visual scripting system where it's just, okay, do this and then do this and do this, is fast and it doesn't require a programmer to do it. Okay. So it means that you could give this to the guy who's building the worlds who may not really have a whole lot of programming experience in a real language. Okay. But um, if you threw them something like this, a visual system for like play this sound, then do this action, and do whatever, right? That's pretty quick. They could probably figure it out without too much trouble. Okay. Um, so they did this, and it was called Kismet. So as the Unreal Engine evolved over time, they realized that actually there was no limitation to what you could do with visual scripting versus code. And so now it's basically the case that you can program an entire game in Unreal Engine using nothing but Blueprint. Now you have to be a little smart as to how you organize things and whatnot, but you can literally do it without a single line of C++ code. So you could program something, okay, maybe not quite on the level of Fortnite, but getting pretty dang close to that. Um, if you really wanted to, you could program almost the whole thing in Blueprint. So I want to show you guys it's just a little bit of what that looks like, okay? Because just because this isn't necessarily your last experience with block-based coding. It might be, but not necessarily. Okay. Also, and I think when I show you guys the blueprint, you're going to notice some similarities to. Has anybody done any like high-end photo or video editing where you're doing like composting colors and things like that? And there's some visual scripting for that. You're going to recognize a lot of the idea for it. Okay. And so, it's definitely the case that you could see you're going to run into visual coding again if you continue in, kind of the CS or development world. Okay. Um, okay. So that's sort of the plan for the very end. The plan for the next kind of couple weeks is I want to use a little bit of the time in class just kind of for studio work. Okay, almost like an art studio. Like let's just do stuff. Okay, I'm not going to yak up here at the front. Okay, okay. So let's kind of return back to the big, where we're going for the next few weeks, right? is I want you guys to start thinking about what game do you want to design from scratch, okay? Or, because this is a reasonable option, we actually have already started making two games, right? The space shooter and the monkey thing. Well, okay, so there's two good examples of game types. Can you do a space shooter for your big game? Sure. Okay, but what's going to be the difference between the space shooters we've done thus far and a big space shooter? What's the kind of stuff I'm going to expect out of the big project? Yeah, lots of different enemy types and bosses and maybe different levels and different weapon types and power ups and all kinds, right? Like really fully flesh it out. And pew pew sounds, right? We didn't have any um, audio when we did the original space shooter. Like really take it to its logical conclusion. Okay, similar with the monkey game, although you don't have to do the like. It doesn't have to be the monkey, right? So we've done side scroller and the space shooter, right, which I guess is kind of a side scroller. Um, but what other kinds of things could you do? We talked about the tile map. So if you could do a side scrolling tile map, you can do a top down tile map. And what's the really the only difference from a like physics perspective? Well, there's no gravity in a top down, right? Because you're already on the floor. And so the movement controls will be a little bit different, but top down, side scroller, not really that much difference. And in fact, could you switch between them like within a single game? Yeah, because you can turn gravity on and off at will. Okay. Where's a game that actually does this? How many of you guys played Super Mario 3 on the original Nintendo? Or it on, an emulator or something? Yeah, probably. Okay, well, let's pull it up on YouTube just so that we're all clear as to um, um, let's see. Let's go to YouTube. Sorry, I've got somebody on the chat here who's tuned in. Maybe they're still watching. Huh? Yeah, I don't know. But whoever the random person is on the chat, be sure to mash that subscribe button and like, and hit the bell if you want more content. Okay, so, it would be. um, okay, so what do we want to search for here? Mario 3. Okay. Um, so let's just watch sort of a quick little snippet here after the ad. Okay, so here, right? So you start the game and you're in this sort of overworld, and you can move your character around to select which level that you're going to play. Or there's some mini games and other kind of things. So, for example, like um, after you beat the second level, you actually have a choice, right? You can play the third level or the fourth level to get over to the Mushroom Hut, which gets you like a mini game. But you don't have to, right? You don't even have to play both of them at all, right? You could go directly over to the castle, okay, and then keep going around. So you do have to play 5 and 6 in order. Um, and then to the castle. Okay, so this is just one of the many worlds that are in Mario 3, but the game is in a top-down mode, and you move around along some sort of thing, and then select which level you're going to go in. So could we do something like this? Absolutely. Okay. Um, and then let's see. If we go continue, right? Well, then it's the usual Mario Brothers that you guys all know and love. Okay. Yeah, so that's completely possible to switch back and forth. Okay. Um, and where you could do that would be, well, like if you wanted to make something sort of Mario 3 like, you could do that. But the top-down tile map thing that you do doesn't have to be as perhaps, let's go back. It doesn't have to be that limiting, right? Could you imagine that you're like walking around in a dungeon and then it switches to a side scroller, right? So sort of like Zelda, but then you go into like a Mario kind of platformer. 100% could do that. Okay. Does that sound entertaining? Maybe. Okay. So what else could you do here? Um, those are kind of the fundamental pieces that you have at your disposal, right? Top down, side scroller, and of course the side scrolling could be up and down or left and right, whatever seems appropriate. The space shooter was kind of an instance of that. Um, yeah, what else? What else could you do here? I mean, it is possible to make sort of Pokemon style games. In fact, actually, if we go back to their main, let's go back to the MakeCode Arcade. They do have in here some of these live coding things. These are basically like streams, kind of like I'm doing in class, right? Of people uh, doing game development, and typically the way that they're set up is it's an adult and a child, and they're kind of working through together with the kid. Um, and the intent for some of this is right that like let's say that you were a parent, you would sit down with your child and you'd watch the video and do the stuff together. Um, yeah. So anyway, okay, but there is one of them in here that's kind of worth looking at, and let's see, um, where is it? Um, they kind of so there's Smash Buddies. What do you think they're going through there? Smash Brothers. Yeah, you could do that, right? It's not going to be nearly as cool as Smash Brothers, but hey, that's okay. Um, and then there's also one of them that's um, they call it what is it? That's JavaScript Game Jam. That's kind of a uh, what is it? A Pokemon kind of game. Um, let's see where this is. Okay, of course now I can't find it when I'm thinking about it, but yeah, the Pokemon game, and it was really kind of clever the way they themed it because it was like your Pokemons were like pizzas and stuff. But okay, I'll look back through it. It's in here somewhere. But um, yeah, okay. So there's a bunch of little demos in here that maybe could inspire you to do for a few things. There's this guess the letter. Um, I don't know. You guys could make Wordle if you really wanted, right? I don't know. I'm getting a little sick of seeing green, gray, and yellow boxes as people's Facebook posts or Twitter posts or whatever. Like, yeah. Okay. Anyway, so maybe play through some of these other ones and just kind of see, what else is there. What have other people done here? As a and maybe you'll be inspired. Okay. Or you'll see a mechanic from one of these that, hey, I think if I did that and I combined it with this thing over here or this other idea I have, like think about things in sort of that vein. Okay. Okay, so what I want you guys to do then is, and I'll post a little assignment to Canvas, is give me like a couple of paragraphs, or if you will, just a short description of what are you kind of thinking for your big game. Okay, so almost like a topic proposal, if you will. Um, I just to make sure that you're steering kind of in the right direction, and you're not going to either do something that's impossible or bite off more than you could chew or whatever. Okay. Now, in um, that document, okay, and this is where you have to kind of really think. Let's say, for example, that we decided we wanted to do a space shooter. Okay. what's sort of the development cycle for the space shooter? Okay, now, yes, we've already made the very basic part of it, right? That has the ship and a single enemy and the fuel gauge and so on. Okay, but you kind of want to follow the same pattern that we already have, which is okay, you got a spaceship in. Okay, now the spaceship can move. Okay, now the spaceship has some fuel and can move. Oh, and now there's power ups that allow you to fill up your fuel bar. Okay, now let's get an enemy in. Okay, what happens if you run into an enemy, right? So, all of those sorts of steps where you keep continually adding and refining on things, that's the exact kind of process that you want to go through here. Okay. Don't just try and do all of it at once because it's going to be a disaster if you do. Okay. So think about, okay, with the space shooter, I'm going to do all of this stuff in the first level. Then I'm going to start adding multiple levels and different types of enemies and different bosses and maybe new power ups and new weapons and all of that kind of stuff, right? But don't try and do it all at once. And so, sort of, as you think through this, try and kind of roadmap what are the big picture steps that you need to accomplish, right? And then you just kind of work through those steps. And at every iteration, okay, you got to do two things. You got to test it. Okay. You also got to get somebody else to test it. And this is where the peer review stuff comes in. Okay. Um, and uh, you also don't necessarily think that because you've done something earlier that you never have to think about that part of it again. Because what you may realize, and this is something that comes with experience when you start programming, right, is so you guys, well, maybe let's take last time and the time before when we were talking about um, the tic-tac-toe game, right? There were a couple of instances where I was like, I'm going to do this now because I know where I'm going to be 5 steps ahead, right? That comes, of course, with experience, okay? That well, experience both as a programmer and with this particular language, okay, that knowing where I'm going to have to do something 5 steps down the line, it might influence a decision I make now, okay? And so it might be the case that you make the wrong decision, so to speak, now, and for now it's fine, but a week later, you may realize, I really should not have done it that way, and you're going to have to go back and redo it. That's just part of programming. No matter how experienced you are, you that inevitably happens that you've got to um, go back and redo something. Okay. All right. So does that kind of make sense for the big picture here? Yeah. Um, okay. So the way that we'll do this too is. Um, I'll have you guys turn that in for, what, Tuesday next week, and then I'll give you some commentary. Um, we'll do, I think, a couple of rounds. It'll, I think, be about 2 or 3. I'll need to look at the calendar and count correctly. Where you guys will turn in a project, and then there'll be a window for doing some peer review on it. Okay, and the what I found was logical before is have you guys turn in the thing Sunday night, and then the peer reviews we can do early that next week, and then that gives you plenty of time plus a weekend for the next iteration of it. Okay, um, and uh, yeah, okay. So, any questions or ideas? Yeah. No, not this Sunday night. Yeah, for the next. Right, right. Exactly. Okay, and that if you guys get that to me for Tuesday, then we'll be set because then I'll have the latter half of next week to make some commentary on it, and then that Sunday will be when you guys are turning in your first version of the game. Now, I do not expect, by the way, at that point that the game is complete. Lord no, right? But it's at least started. Okay, because what would happen if I said, okay, your final project is due on May whatever at such and such time. Have fun. Well, okay, there's that, but also like it'd be kind of like let's say I say 2 weeks from now on Friday, you have a paper due. It should be about this. Have fun. When is that paper going to get written? Yeah, okay, the night before. Whereas if I say, okay, the paper's due in 2 weeks, but next week the rough draft is due, and the end of this week, just say, right, the annotated bibliography is due, and the end of last week the topic was due, right? What happens if I do that? Am I going to get a better final product? Yeah, because I've scaffolded it right. Like, I'm not stupid. I wasn't born yesterday, or I don't know, maybe you guys have heard this one. I didn't fall off the turnip truck yesterday. No? You've heard that one? Okay. Maybe that's a southern saying, but um, you know, we have some sayings like that in my family that are maybe a little too colorful for being on the stream. Anyway, so right, that the scaffolding of this is really important because otherwise you guys are going to, well, either wait to the last minute or get overwhelmed with like, where do I start? Right. Um, okay. And so that's why I'm going to scaffold it the way that I do. Okay. The peer review thing will actually be all automated through Canvas. It's really cool how I do it. That said, though, because of that, you cannot turn in your thing late because the way I have to configure Canvas is it'll automatically assign peer reviews at the instant that the due date hits, right? And so if your thing's not in, it's not going to assign you, and then you fail. You suck. Okay, got it? Yeah. So don't be late. Um, okay. So yeah. So then on Tuesday, I think what would make sense to talk about in class is what are the ideas you guys are considering, uh, and let's kind of hear the range of ideas because um, even though you guys are all going to work on these things individually, let's say that two of you decide that you're going to do space shooters. Okay. I want you to know who else in the room is doing a space shootery kind of thing. Okay. Because it would be good for you guys to talk with each other periodically. Hey, how I was doing this thing too. Here's how I did. Oh, that's clever. Right. You're going to learn in the process of doing that. Okay, so Tuesday, let's plan for just kind of for part of the class at least, just sort of discussing our ideas. Okay, in terms of what are we thinking for our games, what kind of mechanics are we thinking might be cool to add, what sort of our wish list, if you will, of different features that you could do, and then maybe we can talk about okay, how might you tackle dealing with some of those features. Okay, make sense? Okay. Um, Right, and then we'll spend some of the time just kind of doing work, basically. Where I'll quit the stream and we'll just kind of walk around and do stuff. Okay. Um, right. The other thing on the subject of sort of peer review, I think I mentioned this on Tuesday, but I wanted to mention it again, which is, and I know I mentioned it at the very beginning of the course, um, Saturday the 23rd, I think it is. So it's what, 2 weeks from this Saturday? What's going on? Huh? Yeah, the museum thing. Okay. So I need to send out a little like an RSVP thing, if you will, because I know a couple of you guys told me that like you're expecting that there's going to be a sports tournament or something that day or whatever. Um, just so A, I know how many of you guys are going to be able to come, and B, therefore, how much food to get, right? Because Wabash always eats. And of course, if Colin's going to be there, then I'm just going to have to just buy my own Jimmy John's franchise probably, and then yeah, yeah, he'll put me out of business. Yeah. So, well, it depends on whether or not he's paying or not, right? So, um, anyway, just to because the museum folks, we've been talking back and forth over the last couple days about getting, how many roughly of you guys am I going to be able to expect to be there? Um, make sure we're going to advertise it right and so on. And I think basically we're going to advertise it to like second, third grade up to about sixth grade age in the county. The some of the so the city and the north schools do middle school six, seven, eight, but the south schools I think does middle school or sorry, elementary school includes sixth grade. Do I have that right? Yeah, okay. So I think it's the Southmont or the South County schools that do it that way, and then city and north do it the other way. Okay. So because of that, when we say elementary school, we usually include sixth grade at minimum because that is still elementary school in part of the county, just the way they've structured their schools. But that's roughly speaking the age that we're going to be targeting with our advertising. There will probably be younger and older kids that come. Usually, when that happens, it's siblings of the people that we're targeting, right? Um, and so, uh, yeah, somebody from the paper might come. That happens occasionally when we do things at the museum. So wear Wabash gear and, you know, look nice. And, I don't expect you to put on a shirt and tie, but like have showered that day, maybe would be nice. Yeah. Huh? Yeah. Okay. Well, wait, your assignment is to plan Colin's wardrobe for the thing. I know. And have to walk all the way downtown, right? So anyway, um, yeah, okay. So I'll send out some quick info about that. But basically, we're gonna I think advertise it for 1 to 3 open to the public, and so if I get you guys there about noon, that'll be enough time for us to get computers set up in various places and scarf some sandwiches. So sound good? Yeah. Okay. Um, All right, so I think that's basically what I wanted to accomplish today. So I guess we can quit a little early. Any complaints there? Yeah. So, all right. Well, I will see you guys on Tuesday, and make sure to pay attention to Canvas for when I post the assignments. So you guys can start thinking about that. But you know what it's going to be. So, yeah.